in a confined place, you can increase the output of milk by 5%, just by letting it walk freely. And the second thing we came to know was simply allowing it to drink water whenever it wanted to, rather than having a fixed time. Another 5% could be improved. So just by knowing these two things, the farmer could increase his output by 10%. And imagine in the big picture, dairy represents 11% of Pakistan's GDP. Just by doing these two things, you could impact 10% of the total GDP. And by, if you look at it, if you double the output of an animal, which won't be too much, I mean, simply from 1,300 liters, you go 2,600 liters, you could double, you could have 11% increase in your GDP. So now you start to see, what is the impact in the big picture and for the individual farmer as well. And so we decided that, okay, we will work on the training. That would be the one thing that we want to do. And the other thing we want to do was create access to market for the farmer. Because hota ye hai ki, it's dispersed all over Pakistan, and milk is a very delicate product. It starts to break down within a couple of hours of it being available to you. So, how do you create that access to the market? And that's where we introduced this dairy hub concept, which is now, in partnership with the different milk producers who are our customers like Nestle and Angro. And we've gone in and we've set up these, and they, what they do is basically collect milk, but at the same time they become a community center. So then we have an opportunity to get a vet over there. We have an opportunity to have training sessions over there. And I can tell you it is absolutely amazing. Areas where the milk collection was only 400 liters, that has jumped to 8,600 liters. And see how much money this farmer is earning. So it's not going to the middleman, it's going to the farmer. And he gets a bonus for the quality of the milk. And, end of the day, we are end users, and that's how it affects us. So it's a really amazing thing that we saw. 1,200 animals, if you look at a block of 1,200 animals, we've seen only fatalities of 8 animals, for example. Why? Because now we have a database software, we can track the animal, we can track its output, we can track, vaccines, we can track, all kinds of statistics, and then we can advise the farmer specifically. So yes, it has been very self-enriching experience, and so I am very proud of it, and it has created a very win-win sort of a situation. So, the producers like Angro and Nestle are happy because they're getting access to quality milk. The farmer is happy because, he can manage the herd well and he has economic prosperity. And as Tetra Pak, we are very happy because, the dairy sector overall is developing. So, that has been one thing, and I would also encourage other companies to come into these kind of things because really, every drop will make a difference. Thank you.
I don't know if you know this, but most Pakistanis are lactose intolerant. Did anyone know that? It's a terrible statistic I just discovered. And despite that, we're a huge milk consumer, and we have a shortage. But that's not to say that we shouldn't be exporting milk, because there are countries all over the world that would happily take our milk. Our last panelist today is Dr. Imran Ali. I mean, we should end with a professor who give us a synopsis of where we stand. Dr. Imran Ali is a professor of economic history at LUMS.
Thanks. Okay, thanks. Let me just talk a little bit about the background, because I think you've been exposed to some of the initiatives that have happened. But I think in terms of the social responsibility of a very important segment like accountants, from my perspective, a very important part of that social responsibility is really to try to know and understand one's own history, to see how outcomes have happened, why have they happened, who were the players and stakeholders involved in them, and how can we begin to, by understanding historical processes, maybe try to make interventions that might rectify or reverse some anomalies and contradictions and inequities that exist in our society. So it's a very wide area, and I only have a few minutes, but clearly, okay, there is a very important initiative in microfinance, but let me also then again make the point that Amjad Saab made, that when you're talking about 20% plus interest rates, that's prohibitive, and when you're talking of 30% plus interest rates, that's exorbitant, and that's getting back into the usurious rates that we were all blaming our non-Muslim friends of exacting from our rural stakeholders on the basis of which we created the country. And in the process got rid of our business element, which got evicted to India, and we had to start from square one. And that's one of the reasons why there is an underdevelopment of institutions and of a balancing of society between the old feudal, inputted, embedded agrarian hierarchies and the new elements of urban-based, institutionalized, modernizing, progressive forces. That till now, I think maybe it's at an interesting balance, but it has really been in very much in the favor of the former. So let me just quickly even go back before 47, because a lot of the analysis here in social sciences is from 1947 onwards, as if the world was created in 1947. But let me try and say that already a lot of the processes and systems that we have followed in the previous half century were already embedded and deeply rooted by 47. And it is the political economy set up under imperialist rule, in a sense, that continued on for the next half century. And what was the great economic kind of process that happened in the Indus Basin economy? It was clearly the extension of canal irrigation by the British imperial authorities, and that completely transformed this economy. And we then have to look at how that newly canal irrigated land was utilized, who got the land, for what purpose, what was the outcome, and what was the result of that in terms of political economy, which carried on into the kinds of interaction of stakeholders that we have landed with in the early 21st century. Let me just say that in the Punjab, for instance, it was seemingly a very egalitarian basis. 80% of the Faisalabad area, Lower Chenab colony, which was one of the major canal colonies, was allotted to peasant grantees, abadkars, of up to 50 acres. So we can say, okay, here's poverty alleviation going on. Quite a lot of land was allotted to much larger landowners as well, but the majority goes to the peasantry. But what part of the peasantry? And that is where the real problem of poverty alleviation is. Because the land went to the agricultural castes, the land-owning village bhayachara, the upper peasant elite, the village dominant caste, not to the service caste, the landless caste, the so-called kammis as they were disparagingly called even in official documents, not to the rural poor. They were excluded from occupancy or access to land, and certainly proprietary access. And therefore, were they citizens? Were they eligible for our attention? And let me just end that with one small example that, after all, it was a Christian imperial government, and a lot of Christian churches and missions were really striving to get some land for their converts. But the British never gave land to the converts directly, because that would upset the social balance. So the land was given to the churches, Roman Catholic, Presbyterian, Methodist, Protestant, etc., who would then sublet to their lower caste converts. And this is why there's a lot of trouble going on in areas in Sahiwal, etc. So the state must not talk to the ordinary people. It has to talk through intermediaries. It is the intermediaries then that stop the process of poverty alleviation or resources flowing down to the actual people. And we can see this paradigm and this model repeating itself over the next century. So a lot of the, very commendable efforts going on in rural development, community development, etc. What we want to make sure is what are the constraints where the transfer of resources isn't really happening. And in a sense, a lot of the mechanisms that we see, the transfer is from poor to rich. That is constantly happening. And if we come into the situation in 1947, the poor people that were excluded, let's say, from landholding and were supposed to remain as agricultural laborers and service caste servitors, the service castes in the Jajmani system, etc., they never got the vote. The vote was given to people who owned land. So adult universal franchise was not brought in by the British, but at least there were some elections. Now what happens after 1947 is that the political economy of exclusion and a political economy that is hostile to poverty alleviation, in fact, that is based on resource transfers from poor to rich.